Welcome back, everyone, to the Land Between the Meadows Kentucky History Podcast. I'm here again in the wonderful, sunny city, town, community, small village of Crab Orchard with Mr. Pope. How you doing, Mr. Pope?
I'm doing great. Unlike you, I didn't herd cattle before I came in.
Yeah, I was on my way here, and I was a little bit late because of a few strays in the road. They figured out who says cows are dumb animals. They got out of that fence and was right in the middle of the road.
Yeah.
Only thing is that they didn't move till I got out. I don't know how big these cows were. Is there an adolescent form of cows? I mean, they weren't calves.
Sure.
They weren't calves, but they weren't full
adolescents.
Well, whenever I tried to get them out, they kind of looked at me like, "We ain't moving, bud."
We've got some in our government like that.
A little stubborn, didn't want to move. Yeah,
that's right.
Well,
we're going to be talking about some stubborn politicians in Kentucky's past today. William Goebel, who was born in 1856, was really, I don't know if a lot of people understand what a really interesting man he was and what he stood for, and his strong beliefs, and what really, I guess, if you wanted to say, caused his death. But it ties in with what we've been talking about, Jameson, in that, we've talked about the Civil War and how the Union Army controlled Kentucky during the war. We talked about the folks from Versailles, her husband went away, and how they stripped them of their farm because they were associated with the Confederacy, and how that, if you sent a letter or even waved at a Confederate soldier, you could be sent in prison, and you were sent to prison. So after the Civil War in Kentucky, there was a lot of strong resentment towards the Union. And what that equaled out to as far as the political atmosphere in Kentucky after 1865 is that Kentucky became more pro-Confederacy after the Civil War than before or during it. And what this meant in politics is that anybody who was like an officer or a soldier, or if you were wounded, or if you lost an arm or a hand or a leg in the Civil War, you were automatically in a high spotlight and cherished by the people of Kentucky. They loved Confederate war heroes. They loved Confederate veterans who had been wounded, and they elected them. So Kentucky became kind of, for 30 years after the Civil War, Kentucky became kind of a country club of pro-Confederate, anti-black, anti-women, everything you can imagine. Black lives didn't matter in Kentucky. A culture across the state. And I say across the state, except for at least one particular area. And that was Northern Kentucky. And this is the home of William Goebel, who was actually born in Pennsylvania in 1856. And his family settled in Covington, Kentucky. And he went to school there. And you were telling me earlier, we were discussing this kind of informally. Tell us a little bit about his childhood, James.
Well,
his language skills.
Yeah, it's very interesting because, as you said, his parents came from Pennsylvania, but they had immigrated from Germany. So, I mean, he was a first-generation American as far as his family goes. He was born in Pennsylvania. But ironically enough, interesting enough, is when he was being raised by his mother, because his father was working, and I think his father was a soldier in the Pennsylvania militia. She taught him, and at a young age, and he only spoke German until the age of 6. He did not start learning English, but he wasn't fluent, I guess, in English until the age of 6, which is just a very interesting little fact about.
Right, I heard that he had never spoken English until he was 7 years old.
Yeah,
his account that I read.
Yeah, well, there you go.
He was German.
Yeah,
and this, this fills right in with Northern Kentucky, because Northern Kentucky, near Cincinnati, right across the river, was the second largest, Covington was at that time, city in Kentucky. It was industrial. And it was German.
Yeah.
They drank that German beer, dark German beer, all along the Ohio River.
Yeah, well, there's a heavy Cincinnati, Covington.
Still is.
Still a heavy German.
Politics up there are entirely different than what they are in central, western, and southern Kentucky. But an interesting thing about Kentucky, and this plays right into Goebel, is that in the 1890s, Kentucky was the most violent state in the United States. There were more killings in Kentucky than any other state in the Union. More murders, more duels, more shoot-em-ups, more feuds.
Yeah.
And New York actually recorded more killings in that year, but they said that they didn't have more killings because they said so often in rural Kentucky there were so many killings that weren't even reported. And in New York they reported everything. So, I mean, it's just astronomical. So here's the background of this German, favoring the Union from northern Kentucky, industrialist, out for the working man, Goebel. He wanted legislation that helped the working man, the common man. He was pro women's voting, pro equality with races, blacks, which didn't settle well with a lot of Kentucky. But he was very popular up there, and he was elected to the Kentucky Senate legislature 3 terms in a row, and actually became the Senate pro tem, the leader of the Senate in Kentucky.
Now, if you want to throw in a little bit of our previous talks, John C. Mayo?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Just the opposite.
Well, just the opposite, but guess who he backed in the election?
I don't think it would be Goebel.
You don't think so?
But maybe he did.
I think, if I'm remembering correctly, you think about Goebel, you think of him versus Taylor, but the real conflict was him in the Democratic primary, like you'd said with who was his opponent in the Democratic? Samford?
It may have been. He killed him anyway. Goebel killed him. The problem with Samford is that Goebel joined this powerful law firm and was groomed by them politically in northern Kentucky. And Samford owned the toll roads. He owned the bridges going across the river. He was railroad. And everything that Goebel in court went after, or in the legislature, he won. Something like 30 cases straight.
Yeah.
Saying that the railroads were not regulated enough, that they charged too much, that the toll roads charged too much, and he reduced it. He wouldn't let them raise their fares. They're going across the bridge between Kentucky and Cincinnati. They charged a toll, and he reduced the toll, wouldn't let them raise the rates, and became a hero of all these people. But it infuriated Samford. And they had his number, and Samford even verbally threatened to kill him.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to talk about his popularity, but he earned a lot of nicknames during his political career, and Boss Bill was one of them. The Kenton King, which is referring to Kenton County. The Kenton Czar, which is that's probably a jab at his heritage. King William I and William the Conqueror, because he was so good at his legislative ability. And like you said, it really... I guess you could say it rubbed Samford the wrong way. I mean, he was his passage, his legislation affected, I guess, Samford. But yeah, the duel with Samford was a pretty interesting time. Do you have any?
It was just the shootout more than it was a duel.
Yeah.
Let me just say that the atmosphere in Kentucky with all these murders was really contentious. It really was. I mean, and it's that way today. We have such divided politics. We're facing election tomorrow.
Yeah, it'll be tomorrow, which I mean today. By the time this episode's out, the election will probably settle.
Yeah, hopefully. I don't know. I don't know. But because, things are really heated today and over some of the same topics in a way that they were, back then. It's... today, if we're over Black Lives Matter, we're over, racial issues, over corporate America, stealing all the money, and the common want to know where their tax money went, and all this kind of stuff. The same thing was going on 1890s in Kentucky. And you look at how divided the state was. Even in central Kentucky, you had Henry Clay, that had 7 grandsons during the Civil War, and 3 of them fought for the North, and 4 of them fought for the South. That's Henry Clay.
Yeah.
So this is the atmosphere that Goebel inherited, and this violence of just shoot 'em up and just ripping Kentucky apart constantly in different regions of the country, just like in our podcast. If for you followers out there, if you've followed them, we've talked about you give me a region, and I'll tell you how they stand politically and religiously. And we've talked a lot about Eastern Kentucky, and their politics, even when we talked about Mayo in one of our last episodes and what that was like.
Now, the Samford and Global duel, if you want to call it that, which dueling was outlawed. When was it? I mean, it was late, was it 18? I mean, it was 1800.
Right.
Early 1800s.
Right. Well, Goebel entered politics in 1887. That's when he started running for the Senate. So, the date of that, I think it's around 1890. That Goebel and Samford had this falling out. But let me tell you something. Back then, you could write letters in the newspaper with a pseudonym, and you could make stuff up about somebody. And Samford started doing that to Goebel. He would write letters, and what really infuriated this feud between the two is that Samford started writing all these things about Goebel, just humiliating him and calling him names and ugliness, and you really didn't know. The newspapers wouldn't tell, but someone got a hold of the original manuscripts and showed them to Goebel with Samford's handwriting. So Goebel, just to show you how dirty politics is, evidently Samford had been having affairs on his wife and had, according to Goebel, gotten gonorrhea. So he wrote an article, just imagine this, and he called him Gonorrhea Samford, and wrote about how that Samford had gonorrhea and was unfaithful to his wife and everything. So you can imagine this didn't go over well at home, to one of those powerful men, probably the most powerful man in northern Kentucky and one of the wealthiest citizens of Kentucky. So they, shortly after these two letters, they were approaching the Capitol building on one of the main streets in Frankfort, and Samford was leaning on a rail. And Goebel was with two of his friends. And he said...
He reached out with his left hand.
That's right. And he shook their hand. He had a hand in his pocket. And his friend said, "Look who's there." Said, "That looks like Samford." And Goebel said, "Yeah, that's the..." And he actually said S.O.B. And they went up, and he shook hands with Goebel's two friends, his left hand, I guess. He had his right hand in his coat. And said, asked Goebel, when he turned to Goebel, he said, "Did you write that letter?" Which was an anonymous letter. Goebel didn't have to tell him. He said, "I sure did." Wrote about you, gonorrhea Samford. And with that, Samford pulled out a pistol and shot at Goebel, and the bullet went through his coat and missed his body. And almost in the same instant, evidently, was Goebel pulled his gun. He was armed. And shot him right straight between the eyes, the forehead, and he died almost instantly.
There you go.
Right there on the steps. So, there's a little leading up to this, little tension going on. And again, Samford owned stock in all the railroads, and Goebel had, said that which they were, the railroads were getting a free ride, that their property assessments and their tax bills were not where they should be because the railroad property was worth a lot more. Of course, Samford fought this, but Goebel won it in the Senate, and he raised doubled the property of railroad properties, which increased, I don't know how many millions of dollars in taxes the railroad had to pay. And he was just always doing things like that and championing fairs.
Well, whenever I was looking up at Goebel, I found a lot of interesting, personal characteristics. It said that he was not a good public speaker. He was not very charismatic and so forth. However, what he did with able to get the tolls, what he did really champion, for the lower class, if you want to say that. And he was hugely popular. And he really, that's why he was able to, I guess, rise in Senate and so forth in politics.
They said on the Senate floor, whenever an issue came up that Goebel championed, people just feared it if you were on the other side, because when he stood up to speak, he was so convincing as an attorney. He went to the Cincinnati Law School. And that's what they called it, the Cincinnati Law School. And that's where he was educated. And he evidently was a really sharp cookie. And when he came and he put his mind to get something, that was it. And he never lost a case that he argued in the Senate 30 times. So that was pretty amazing.
And I guess when I mean a public speaker, because you think of a campaign, somebody going around speaking in that manner, his intellect was very persuading. So
the railroad that he really attacked was the L&N, the Louisville and Nashville. And he increased their taxes by over $3 million, which was a dramatic increase.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, the railroads were they would buy politicians off. This was common.
Common now.
Common now. The lobbyists were just, oh my goodness. They gave them everything from whiskey to money to to get them on the thing to vote. This, that, and the other. Goebel worked tirelessly. And he wanted to also rewrite the Constitution of 1850, the Kentucky Constitution, where he wanted to put some things in. And he knew that if he rewrote the Constitution, that he would do it in a way where he couldn't get the same things passed if he put them up for legislation because of, the Republicans. He was a Democrat. And so he successfully rewrote the Constitution and changed some of the laws and the way we do things.
Now, one of the big issues and the most connected...
I want to also say, before we leave the Constitution, that just to give you what some of the things that Goebel championed was child labor laws.
Wow, yeah.
And he said that, and even said you can't pay people with like stock or like company checks. You have to pay them cash. You have to, and that certain children shouldn't work and be used. And he passed that in Kentucky. Yeah. Whereas labor laws are just child labor laws in Kentucky. That's what they did. There was a sweat house for children. But he's the one that championed that and got it to challenge.
So what is known as the Goebel election law.
Yes.
That was a big thing that he got a pass in, I think it was in 1896, which basically allowed the legislator to pick the people on the election committee. And it's just so ironic that he pushed for this because it really plays into his time as governor. Are we ready to move on to the next stage of his life?
Oh, sure. We'll move it. Heck yeah.
All right, so he wants to become the governor, and this, and you talked about just kind of the Wild West feel of Kentucky, and around this time, if you remember, when we talked about John Cece Mayo at the Frankfurt Hotel and the big shootout that was there, and this was this would have been recently, right after Goebel was assassinated, like a few years, I guess. Kentucky just had that Wild West feel to it, and.
Well, there were a lot of, Kentucky was a divided state again during the Civil War, and there were a lot of feuds going on. The Hatfields and McCoys, you name it. And there was people just took matters to their own, and duels were a common practice. And this was just a way of everyday life in Kentucky. And politics were very heated, and there was still this flow from the Confederacy, which controlled everything. And then there was this mainly came down from the north, Germans influence industrial areas of Kentucky. This was just classic, and he was one of the key players in it.
So he wants to become governor, and first thing, of course, as a Democrat or a Republican, they want to become the nominee for their party. And it was a very contested race. It was him, a guy named Watt Hardin, and William Stone. I think that was his challengers.
Yes.
And interesting enough, him and Stone, I think, came together and said, "Hey, if me and you will combine our support," and Goebel said that if we combine our support, we'll push, then we'll push you in. Well, then the one guy, I think Hardin, drops out of the race and says, "Well, they got it." Well, then Goebel and Stone have a falling out, so Goebel then says, "I'm running. I'm going to go for it." And then the Hardin guy comes back in and goes, politics as usual, I guess, if you want to say it like that. But in the end, Goebel is able to persuade the majority of Stone's followers or what they call delegates to vote for him. And mainly the reason is because they know that if they go against Goebel, they're probably not going to win. So they end up falling in with Goebel, and Goebel gets the nomination for the Democrats.
They had a situation where they had some sort of a debate, in a forum, and the other side that was opposing Goebel kept playing Dixie and waving the rebel flag over and over and wouldn't hardly let him speak. So he had to wait a long time, and they just kept playing the song over and over again before the crowd. Then finally, when Goebel spoke, the crowd just fell silent. They nailed him. But, here we go. Just talking about watching the news this morning about somebody leaving a noose, with NASCAR and how they flying rebel flags in the air over the airstrip. I mean, it's the same thing. And back here, they are,
100 years ago.
100 years ago, playing Dixie, not letting them speak, trying to control the airwaves. There's this friction between the Southerners, and their legacy, and the North, the Northern industrialists. So
I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure Mayo supported Goebel in the election. I'm pretty sure.
Really?
Yeah, and
I would like to know that for sure.
Well, I mean,
it doesn't seem right.
It doesn't seem right. It seems odd, and I know I read about it because it was talking about his influence in politics. And
well, first of all,
now Mayo was a Democrat, so I mean, when it came to Goebel versus Samford,
Goebel was a Democrat.
Obviously, I'm pretty sure he was for that. I was trying to think of in the primary.
Here's some reasoning without knowing what the answer is. Why would Mayo support Goebel? Mayo did not like Central Kentucky politics.
True. That's very true.
Yes. So he might select the man from Northern Kentucky who were taking on these rebels, and this was the status quo, in Kentucky. So that would make sense that way.
There you go. I think we're right.
I hope we are.
Nobody go research this and tell us we're wrong.
Right. We don't want to be told we're wrong. We'll fight you in a duel or something.
But that's an interesting thing about the dueling. And I mean, it wasn't a technical duel as in the early 1800s, late 1700s, that was banned. You got the Aaron Burr and Hamilton duel, and it wasn't like that. It was just a street confrontation. But that happened a lot in Kentucky. We've talked about multiple times when people went guns a-blazing in the middle of public. Luckily, I guess, not as many people got hurt in this duel as opposed to the one in the Capitol Hotel. So William Taylor.
Let me just tell you some of the. I'd like to read something to you here about an argument that was going on between Goebel's old enemy Theodore Hallam. Appearing before a crowd of Democrats, Goebel's old enemy Theodore Hallam recalled that he had once said that if the Democrats nominated a yeller dog for governor, he would vote for him. So how come you're against Goebel now? Someone asked. Indeed, Hallam allowed. He had said he would vote for a yeller dog, then added, but lower than ye shall not drag me. Speaking in the same town later, Goebel fired back saying that Hallam, a lobbyist for L&N, was a drunken and a debauchee with the face of a cancerous beefsteak. So you can tell the rhetoric here is leading up. And so, once again, we look at today and we look back then, when you have two sides that are starting to just be name-calling, and then he calls Samford gonorrhea Samford and all this stuff. Pretty rough things, and he's implying that he's going out on his wife and that he got a venereal disease, and he has it, I mean, this is the most powerful person in Kentucky, and they're going back and forth. And then, what happens, we know that we're going to talk about it, I'm sure, about the election, and then Goebel's assassinated because of this rhetoric and this hate that's going on. And we kind of see this now where certain parties are like name calling other people and in our politics today, and are really getting personal. Calling people that they're ignorant and this, that, and the other because of the way they feel, and just going on. And this ratchets up already tensions. And we're experiencing that today, I think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, you talk about name calling. It's not just at the, top of the chain. It's all the way down.
All the way down to the bottom.
The people on Facebook.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
So William Taylor is Goebel's opponent when it comes to to the governorship or the governor candidacy. Or the election, I guess I should say the governor, the gubernatorial, how do you say it?
Yeah, gubernatorial.
Gubernatorial. Get my tongue out of the way. Election of 1899.
I want to just tie something else in. It's so interesting, history in these podcasts, to tie things in for our readers. If you've been following some of our lessons, we talk about Mayo. What made Mayo was the railroads.
Oh, yeah.
And so you've got Goebel, and he states, and this is a quote from him, I believe that the Railroad Corporation should have a bit in their mouths, and the Democratic Party should hold the bridle.
Wow.
So that was one of his quotes while he was running for governor.
And then
because the railroads became all powerful from that coal industry and from Mayo and all the money. And so here's people outside that area saying, working for the common man.
Yeah, we should. Yeah, that's interesting. That's a good connection. So William Taylor becomes the Republican nominee. I mean, he's kind of a bit more. He's a bit different. I mean, he got elected to some seats and built his way up that way. He didn't attend school until he was 15. Mm-hmm. He worked on the farm there in Butler County. And eventually, though, he did get involved in politics, and he rose up in the ranks in that sense. He gets the Republican Party nominee. And we'll talk about Taylor more in depth in another podcast, because, I mean, he's got a side, I guess, to the story, too. But guess who backed him, and guess what they attacked him for the most as far as the Democrats did?
I don't know.
Oh, come on, take a guess. Choo-choo.
Mayo?
No.
Who did what?
Who backed Taylor?
Oh, the railroads.
Yeah.
Of course.
So he was backed by the L&N.
Right.
And that was the big... That was his big thing. That's what the Democrats attacked. He's part of the railroad, blah, 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 on and on and on. However, things were very interesting once the final vote was tallied. Are you ready to get into that part?
Yes.
All right.
The election comes out and Goebel loses just under 2,000 votes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Goebel is very gracious. Mm-hmm. He says that, thanking his supporters and saying that he planned to go home to rest for a while. But at the same time that's going on in Frankfort, there were thousands of Republicans from eastern Kentucky that had invaded Frankfort, and they were all armed. Yeah. Armed militiamen.
Wow.
Does that sound familiar?
Wow.
And they're protesting.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so that's, the scene in Frankfort is really wild.
Yeah.
There's crazy people from eastern Kentucky. Some of your kids were there.
Power now.
Yeah, and they're all armed.
Yeah.
They're all armed with guns. And this is the most violent state in the Union. Mm-hmm. Okay, so, just guess, what you can imagine is going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, Goebel's supporters weren't going to let it go. They said they yelled foul because they were surprised. They thought Goebel would have it, and should have won. Mm-hmm. And of course, he didn't. So they start claiming, this is a fraud, voter fraud. It's all fake news and everything else. So they started looking, and they began to find that the ballot box was just stuffed with people without signing their name or anything, and they were all, voting for Taylor. Mm-hmm. The legislature, I guess, meets. Mm-hmm. You can jump in here anywhere, and they basically proclaim that it was a rigged election, and that there were thousands of votes that were illegal, and they name Goebel the governor. Yeah, I mean, that's in a short and sweet version of what happened. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's very interesting. And, of course, the counter-argument to all this was it was a Democratic-controlled Congress, a state legislation, or legislators. The election board was run basically by Democrats as well. So there was this big controversy. It all looked really shady on both sides. Like, this one right here looks like they've been stuffing the ballot box, and yet this one over here, this side over here, looks like it's been... or they're just playing to the party. Mm-hmm. And, well, like you said, it comes to the head whenever they proclaim that Goebel was the victor, and I guess you could say award him the governorship, or however you want to say it, that he was the actual winner. Now, if I'm correct, Taylor was sworn in as governor. Correct? Yes. He was sworn in.
Right. And you know who's witnessed this? And let me ask you a question.
Yes.
There was an armed mob of mountaineers and invaded Frankfort to bully the legislation with guns. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Now, we've talked about...
Now, let me see. Who do you think brought all these people in from eastern Kentucky? What entity brought them all in from eastern Kentucky?
The railroad.
The L&N Railroad. Gave them a free ride.
Up on, boys. Let's go get them.
They went up in the mountains. They picked up every armed man they could find, loaded the train down, and drove to Frankfort with this armed mob of Republicans to intimidate the legislature. Yeah. There you go. Welcome to Kentucky.
So then, Goebel is awarded. What's the right way to say that? Nominated or as the governor to be in. And Taylor had been governor, I think, a few months, and at some point, things come to head.
I think he'd only been governor for 4 days or 3 days or something.
No, that's Goebel.
Okay, Goebel has. All right, when he died. That's right.
Goebel is on his way to the Capitol to be sworn in, and he, amongst rumors that he could be assassinated, he's on his way, and he's even got bodyguards and this and that. On January 30th, 1900, he is then met though and confronted and is shot, and he's shot. They, of course, rushed him to the hospital. A bunch of physicians, work on him.
That's right. They rushed him to the back of a hotel.
Oh, yeah.
And the street was bloody. And it said when Goebel was just a few feet from the broad steps, the entrance of the Capitol building, a shot rang out from the executive building. They knew the window and where it came from.
Wow.
A bullet struck Goebel in the chest on his right side. He tried to reach in his pocket for his pistol to pull it from his pocket to return fire. He dropped to the ground, and when he tried to rise, his friend Jack Chin exclaimed, "Lie down or they'll shoot you again."
Wow.
And so after a few minutes, they recovered his body and they carried him to the back of the hotel to a room that he had back there and laid him down in bed.
And he's sworn in as governor, but then 4 days later, he dies.
Yep.
Now, you can go to the old state capitol building, and there's a marker where he got shot at.
It's pretty interesting. I've taken school children there before.
Yeah. He's the only sitting governor to be assassinated or killed.
That's right. In the history of Kentucky.
The history of the nation, right? I think he's the only one in the nation.
I don't know about the nation. I know in Kentucky.
Yeah.
I'd say there's others killed.
So it's very interesting. And that goes on to... It's just a very interesting story on the whole climate of Kentucky. We think about politicians being rough today, but honestly, politicians have been rough.
Yep, for a long time.
Throughout history.
It said that after it happened, Republicans panicked. All these armed people from Eastern, they wanted to get back on the train, get out of Frankfurt because they thought they'd be accused for it.
Yeah.
And of course, Goebel supporters, they cried and everything. And many of the onlookers came running. They all carried guns. So they were going to shoot the people that did this, So there's a few little tense moments there,
Taylor, the Republican, the governor at the moment, prior to Goebel, he calls off the militia, or he tells everybody to back off as well.
Goebel did. Or was it Taylor?
It was Goebel. It was Goebel.
Taylor.
Goebel.
Taylor declared a state of emergency and ordered the militia to take over the Capitol. And he was so freaked out. He asked the legislature to adjourn immediately and meet, the next week in London. Even move the Capitol.
Right. And then
go down to Eastern Kentucky.
No, they went to Louisville.
Right.
And
there were threats and rumors of more assassinations. It was just bedlam. It was crazy.
It was wild.
Yeah, and then all these people armed,
And at the moment...
irresponsible and armed men brought to Frankfurt. That's what, the newspapers said. So it's just a civil war. And I think, Goebel on his deathbed, after he was sworn in as governor, his first thing was to disband the militia and to order the legislature back into session in Frankfurt.
Yeah.
And that was his only decree. Then he died.
Yeah.
But the Republicans were going to use this to move the capital into a stronghold, Republican stronghold, London, Kentucky.
Wow.
Down in the mountains.
There you go. Yeah.
They wanted it all moved down there, and that was Taylor's order to move it. He said, "Well, I'll get on the train and ride down to London, get out of here, and we'll meet down there and start passing laws." Which is a Republican stronghold. It's unreal, isn't it?
That is.
But then you know what happens next.
But then trial, we got...
Taylor flees.
Oh, yeah.
With two or three of his accomplishments, leaves the state and goes into hiding.
He goes to Indiana, right?
So, I don't know where.
I think he goes to Indiana.
He got the hell out of Dodge.
He goes to Indiana.
Because he thought he would be accused, and maybe he was.
And while he's in he's in Indiana for a while, and they won't extradite him. They won't ship him out.
Yeah.
And
we won't cross state
lines. I think he stays
killed
there.
your governor.
I think he stays there and actually becomes quite successful. Ironically enough,
we'll take him. Indiana's so stupid and desperate.
Bunch
of morons. Yeah.
But anyway, and if you're listening from Indiana, we love Indiana.
Oh, we love you. Yeah.
But anyway, a lot of there's a whole trial. And a lot of people are arrested and trialed. Crazy enough, most of the people that are tried and go to jail, they either end up being pardoned or not convicted.
And guess what's going to happen here? History follows. Every guess we've had, if we're paying attention with each person, we've nailed it right on the head. Every question: who brought the people in from Eastern Kentucky? Railroads. L&N. Can you name it? What's going to happen to all these fugitives? They killed the governor.
Interesting enough, and this is a personal connection. And if you've listened to some of my discussions with my grandma, you already know this. My great-grandfather, which would have been my grandma's grandfather, she just knows my stories. But the rumor is that my great-grandfather was part of the conspiracy or the team or the group that planned the assassination of Goebel.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's something to be proud of, I guess.
Well, this is the
there
kid.
you go. Well, I could guess.
Yeah.
Your family's from Eastern Kentucky.
Pineville.
Oh, my God. That's where the train loaded them up. And they were like, yeah, get them, boys. Shoot the governor.
That's what they did. They wrote, hey, man, we go kill this governor.
Yeah.
And my great-grandpappy, yeah, boy.
But let me just tell you, you're talking about the L&N train hauling all these people down. When Goebel's body was taken to the Galt House in Louisville, where everybody in Louisville they had a little ceremony.
Yes.
And then he went to Covington. And you know what railroad he rode on?
What's that?
It wasn't the L&N.
No, he refused.
They refused his people, so we're not putting him on the L&N.
Ohio,
I don't know.
I think it was Ohio Chesapeake.
It probably was.
And you know what's really crazy? This is the biggest connection ever. The Ohio and Chesapeake. If you go back to, and this formally confirms our Mayo connection.
Yeah.
Guess what the railroad was that Mayo finally got to come to Eastern Kentucky, as far as Pikeville, like the Sandy Gap part of it.
Was it the Ohio?
Yes. Chesapeake.
Yeah. Yeah, he didn't want the ones coming out of central Kentucky.
No. So there you go.
Then they're connected to the big metropolis, Cincinnati. But it's interesting, though, and this is one of the main things, and so exciting. I can tell just when we talk, Jameson, that you and I both get real excited about history, and it's making these connections. When you can predict what's going to happen, just by creating an atmosphere. We've said that over and over again. You can just predict history. And so, my thought is, if you want things to go well in this world, create an environment and an atmosphere of like brotherly love and peace, and then great things will blossom.
There you go.
Create hate and racism and all this stuff, and you're going to have problems.
Big problems.
Big problems. You're going to have, horrible society. You're going to, so, just love everyone, man, and be cool.
Be cool, man.
Be cool, man, and don't get on the train with guns, and don't ride with people that are carrying guns. Don't do it. Stay away from them, man, like the plague. And,
if somebody says, let's go assassinate the governor,
you can either flame
say no.
The flames of society, you can either fan the flames, man, or you can try to put them out. And you got it. Everybody's doing one or the other all the time. They're either fanning the flames, man, or they're putting them out.
Yeah.
And it's up to you to see which one you're going to do. Yep.
Yeah. You always got to hope that more people are putting them out.
We hope so, but Lord have mercy. Kentucky. Kentucky. Sure.
Yeah, whenever this podcast is out, who knows what will be going on.
Oh, who knows? Lord have mercy. It's getting wilder every day.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, anyway.
So we've created an environment right now of problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you have armed militia that are working as paramilitary police and you have armed protesters now clashing, what in the hell do you think's going to happen?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Good gracious.
So
settle down, people.
Yeah. So with ending on that positive
note, yeah, and add to the pandemic and new strains of it coming out all the time. What a lovely place.
If you want to connect to us, find us on Twitter, Facebook at KHP.
Yeah.
You can email us, the Land Between the Meadows at gmail.com. We also have a Patreon page you can check out if you want to check it out. We have some other things to check out. You can check out some of these videos. I will eventually get around to putting out videos on these governors, Taylor and Goebel. Both of them will have a video at some point, and all the other governors. But that is going to be down the road because we're only on I think I'm about to do the 7th governor of Slaughter. So we still got about William Goebel, I think, was the 34th governor.
That's right.
So we got a ways till we get to William.
Do we take credit card donations?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Okay. Send us your number and expiration date.
Yeah.
Help pay
and-
for the light bill.
Yeah. So with all that being said, anything else, Mr. Pope?
No, sir.
All right, we'll see
Have
you
a good
next
day.
time.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you.